What is going on, guys? It is Tom or Top 10 Wrestling, and welcome back to another video on the channel. A couple weeks ago I did a video called What Was TNA Like in 2009, where I went through every TNA 2009 pay-per-view and ranked them worst to best. We're doing another What Was TNA Like episode, this time for 2010, which is significant for being the year that Hogan joined TNA, so this was the first year of Hulk Hogan running TNA along with Bischoff and Russo. We're doing it differently this time though. We're not going to do a ranking, we're just going to go through the pay-per-views chronologically, discuss the results and my thoughts on them. I've watched all 12 pay-per-views, so I know what I'm talking about. I'm not just guessing, by the way, but yeah, let's go ahead and get right into the video. But be sure to check out my Patreon and subscribe with notifications on, because only a small percentage of you watching these videos are actually subscribed. So if you do enjoy this video, be sure to subscribe, because, you know, it's free and you can always unsubscribe if you want. But let's get into it.
Hey, this is your Olympic hero, Kurt Angle, and you are watching Top 10 Wrestling. Oh, it's true. It's damn true.
We kicked off the year with TNA Genesis 2010. I don't need to say the year, do I? We kicked off the year with TNA Genesis, which was not good. It's a pay-per-view that was many TNA fans' final straw. We'll run through the card. We opened with Amazing Red versus Brian Kendrick, which was a very good match actually, with Amazing Red retaining the X Division title against Brian Kendrick. We move straight onto that to Sean Morley versus Daniels, where Sean Morley beat Daniels, and this match was terrible and many fans' final straw for TNA. Whatever. Next we have Tara and ODB in a 2 out of 3 falls match, which was pretty good. Hernandez and Morgan versus the British Invasion, DeAndre Denaro versus Desmond Wolfe, yeah, decent. Beer Money versus The Band, Mr. Anderson versus Abyss, yeah, okay. And AJ versus Kurt Angle, which was actually an amazing match and one of the best matches of the year, if not of all time for TNA. So kind of sort of saved the show. I think without that match, this would probably be the worst pay-per-view of the year. So if you want to watch this show, watch the opening match, watch the main event, and maybe watch the women's match if you want, because that was alright, but probably avoid everything else, especially Morley. Next up we have Against All Odds, and this is the pay-per-view that I actually believe to be the worst pay-per-view of the year. The issue with this pay-per-view was that it was a tournament. So on this show, you had tournament matches and 2 non-tournament matches, with the 2 non-tournament matches, one of them being AJ versus Joe for the world title, which was a good match, of course it was. But you had the Nasty Boys versus Team 3D, which was absolutely dreadful. And then other than that, you had the tournament matches, where all the matches other than the final were less than 10 minutes long. So it was just kind of felt like you were watching a special episode of Impact. Wasn't really that great. Yeah, avoid this pay-per-view if you want. Just watch the AJ versus Flair match and or not the AJ versus Flair match, the AJ versus Joe match, and maybe the final with the Pope and Mr. Anderson. But other than that, I'd skip this show if I were you. Next up we had Destination X, which this one was a mixed bag. You open the show with Kazarian, Amazing Red, Brian Kendrick and Daniels having a really good ladder match. Then you go into Tara and Daphne having a decent match for the Knockouts title. Then you have Rob Terry squashing Magnus. Then you have the Motor City Machine Guns versus Generation Me in an incredible Ultimate X match. Then you have The Band versus Eric Young and Kevin Nash, which was not good. Doug Williams and Shannon Moore was alright, I guess. Hernandez and Morgan versus Beer Money wasn't amazing. But then Kurt Angle versus Mr. Anderson was pretty good. And AJ Styles and Abyss was okay until the finish, where Abyss put AJ through the ring and the bell just rang for a DQ, and Abyss got DQ'd for that. So that was not too great. But yeah, this, like I said, mixed bag for this pay-per-view. Then we move on to Lockdown 2010 in April, which was my favourite TNA pay-per-view of 2010. You open the show with Rob Van Dam defeating James Storm in a short but sweet match. Then you have Homicide, Shelley, Brian Kendrick and Sabin in an escape match, again short but sweet, which was good, Homicide winning. Kevin Nash versus Eric Young, it was short, and I think it was better that it was short, with Kevin Nash winning. The Knockouts tag title match, with the Knockouts title also on the line, with the Beautiful People versus Tara and Angelina Love, was not good. Cans versus Homicide and Shannon Moore for the X Division title was good. Team 3D squashing the Band and kind of destroying them in 6 minutes was was actually pretty good. It was better than it had any right to be. Kurt Angle and Mr. Anderson had a match of the year contender, as did AJ and D'Angelo Dinero, and the Lethal Lockdown main event with Team Hogan versus Team Flair was very, very fun. And overall, I thought it was the best TNA show of 2010. We have Sacrifice next, which is another mixed bag here, because you had the Motor City Machine Guns defeating Beer Money and Team 3D in a good opening match. Rob Terry versus Orlando Jordan, which had no right being a match on a pay-per-view, let alone a title match. Doug Williams and Kazarian had a good match. Madison Rayne and Tara was not great. The Band versus Inc. Why would anyone want to watch that? Abyss and Desmond Wolfe, their next match they had at the next pay-per-view was a lot better than this one. Hardy versus Anderson was fine. Sting versus Jarrett lasted 15 seconds. But then the main event with AJ Styles and Rob Van Dam was another show saver. It was a very good match. And overall, like I said, a mixed bag for this pay-per-view too. Next up, we have Slammiversary, which this show here was very good. I really enjoyed this show. Kurt Angle and Kazarian opened the show with a very good match. Doug Williams and Brian Kendrick followed it for the X Division title in a good match. Madison Rayne versus Roxy, Jesse Neal versus Brother Ray, Matt Morgan versus Hernandez, double Abyss and Desmond Wolfe had their Monsters Ball match, which was a lot better than their last match from last month. Jay Lethal and AJ Styles had a brilliant match. Jeff Hardy and Mr. Anderson faced Beer Money in an awesome match. And Rob Van Dam defeated Sting for the TNA World title in the main event in a pretty decent match. Not the best match of the show, but after you get past the Matt Morgan, Hernandez, and Jesse Neal, Brother Ray stuff, the show is very good, and the first two matches were good as well, so this was a good show. Next up, we've got Victory Road, which opens with an X Division, well, this match was weird, Ultimate X submission match, which, while the stipulation was weird, Doug Williams defeated Brian Kendrick in a pretty good match. Then you had Brother Ray, Brother Devon, and Jesse Neal on a three-way dance. No thank you. Then you had Angelina Love defeating Madison Rayne by DQ. No thank you. You had Fortune defeating Rob Terry and Samoa Joe. You had Hernandez and Matt Morgan again. Let's please stop doing this. Jay Lethal and Ric Flair had a match, which Jay Lethal won, and it was actually really good, so big ups to them. Machine Guns and Beer Money had an awesome match. Kurt Angle and D'Angelo Dinero had an awesome match. And then in the main event, in a four-way, RVD, Abyss, Jeff Hardy, and Mr. Anderson for the world title. This was a good match too. Overall, I think the show was good, but there are some stinkers on here. And then we go into Hardcore Justice, the ECW reunion show, which I think was actually better than a lot of people give it credit for. Considering it's 2010 and all these guys are way older, this show was actually fine. You had the opening 6-man tag, which was alright, I guess. Two Gold Scorpio looked really good in his singles match with C.W. Anderson. Stevie Richards and PJ Polaco was a bit of a, a bit of an But Rhino, Al Snow, and Brother Runt had a pretty fun match. Team 3D against Axel Rotten and the Cojones was, not the best. Raven and Tommy Dreamer did what they did, and RVD and Sabu for the main event had a really fun match. So overall, I think this was, for an ECW reunion with the whole ECW context of it, it was good, but obviously these guys are older, so the wrestling isn't going to be incredible. We move on to No Surrender in September, and this show was great. Motor City Machine Guns and Generation Me for the World Tag Titles in the opening match had a classic like they always do. Doug Williams and Sabu, which is such a crazy match that even happened for the X Division title, that was a good match. Velvet Sky and Madison Rayne, not so much. This was a bit of a dark phase for the Knockouts titles. Abyss and Rhino had an alright Falls Count Anywhere match. Jarrett and Samoa Joe against Kevin Nash and Sting was a bit weird. AJ Styles and Tommy Dreamer had a decent I Quit match. Jeff Hardy and Kurt Angle had an awesome match that ended in a time limit draw. And then Mr. Anderson and Dinero, which shouldn't have been the main event, was just fine. But it was difficult to follow the Hardy versus Angle match. But overall, this show was very good, I thought. Bound for Glory next, the big show of the year that TNA do, which this show would have been number one for me had it not been for a thing called hindsight. The opening match with the Bucks and Machine Guns, do I need to explain that it was amazing? The women's four-way that came next was a bit of a dud, as was the tag match with Inc. and Eric Young and Orlando Jordan. Jay Lethal and Douglas Williams for the X Division title was great. RVD and Abyss in a Monsters Ball match was so awesome. I love that match. Then the Band, again, which is now Kevin Nash, the Pope and Sting versus Jarrett and Joe in a handicap match. Let's forget about that. EV2 versus Fortune in a Lethal Lockdown I very much enjoyed, and the main event with Hardy defeating Kurt Angle and Mr. Anderson, and of course turning heel, was a very good main event, despite the little thing called hindsight where we know how not so great his heel run was. We then go to the penultimate pay-per-view, Turning Point, which got the best pay-per-view for 2009. I thought Turning Point 2009 was the best one. But this was a pretty good show. I thought it delivered. Robbie E and Jay Lethal was a bit average to start off, but Mickie James and Tara actually had a really fun match. This was one of the best knockouts pay-per-view matches in a while. Motor City Machine Guns versus Team 3D was a great match. RVD and Tommy Dreamer had a pretty decent match, not as good as the Abyss match though. Then Fortune versus EV2 was fine, it was alright. Abyss versus the Pope I didn't really feel. Jeff Jarrett and Samoa Joe, not really, until the finish, which was really cool, where Jarrett made him tap out, or not really tap out, but win by technical submission. That was really awesome. And then Matt Morgan and Jeff Hardy, not really so great. I mean, Matt Morgan main eventing a pay-per-view, let's not do that. But yeah, it was a bit of a mixed bag again, but overall I thought there was more good than bad on this year's Turning Point. And the final pay-per-view of 2010, which I actually just got done watching, Beer Money versus Ink Inc. Despite me not liking Ink Inc., they opened the show and it was a good match. Tara and Mickie James had a fun Falls Count Anywhere match, these two really delivering. Robbie E and Jay Lethal, not so much. Rob Van Dam and Rhino was alright in a First Blood match, they did their thing. Doug Williams and AJ Styles had a great match for the TV title, with Doug Williams winning the title in his very forgotten face run that he had. The Machine Guns versus Generation Me in a Full Metal Mayhem match for the World Tag titles. Do I need to say more about these two teams? Another awesome match from them. Abyss and the Pope, better than their last match, still not too great. It was a casket match, this one, but it was alright, a lot better than the last one. Jarrett and Joe, again, better than the last one. I thought this was pretty good as well. But the main event was once again Jeff Hardy versus Matt Morgan, which I was not feeling. And apparently allegedly Jeff Hardy was high in this match, but that's a story for another time. And yeah, that was my quick run through of every TNA 2010 pay-per-view. Like I said, best pay-per-view Lockdown, worst probably against all odds. But overall, it wasn't actually that bad of a year in terms of pay-per-views for TNA. TV was awful this year, absolutely dreadful was Impact. But the pay-per-views for the most part were fine to watch. But that's going to do it for this video, guys. If you did enjoy, smack the like button. I'll see you for the next video. Goodbye, and keep on rolling.